Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We're talking about words which, for me, are really interesting. I actually come from a social work background. Social work is an interesting field of activity because it's how human beings help and support other people, how they care for other people, and how they care for other people's welfare. And these 5 videos are all dealing with the history of care and welfare in our societies. Kicking the topic off today with some basic definitions, starting with a really interesting word. For me, it's one of the most fascinating in the English language. What on earth does the word care mean? And can you think of different meanings of the word care? Think also of different terms, different phrases with the word care inside them, so to say. So natter with your partner, think of the word care. What does it mean? Different meanings maybe, and can you think of phrases with the expression care in? Have a natter. What did you come up with? There's a really a richness of meaning here. One basic idea is the idea of being worried or concerned, worry or concern for something or someone. It can have a different meaning, carefulness. If you do something with care, you do it carefully. You take your time, you do it systematically, methodically. It can mean looking after. It can mean protecting. An example of this would be in the phrase care for. I care for my children. I look after them, I protect them. A related phrase is care about. If I care about something, it's important to me. So there's a bit of overlap there, but the two terms are quite distinct and you have to be careful not to mix them up. I've mentioned social work already. I come from a social work background. It's worth noting that what we call in Germany, what we call soziale Arbeit, you can translate it as social work, but you can also translate it as social care. Social care is a kind of big category, which Anglo-Saxon social work is one small part of. So you can talk about the social care system. Within social care, we have lots of expressions of the word care in. For example, if I have big support needs and I can't live on my own, I might live in a care home, receiving care from care workers. You can find many more examples of care expressions in social work and social care. So what an interesting word to kick this topic off with. And another fascinating one coming up here, let's think about the word welfare, starting with its etymology. I want you to pause in a minute. As a German speaker, you might be able to easily guess the etymology of welfare. It's really not difficult for you at all. You just have to think of a very similar German word. So pause here and discuss it with your partner. What did you come up with? Did you guess? The image on the bottom right is from one of my favorite websites, a really lovely website, the Online Etymology Dictionary. And it's a great resource for finding out where words come from. We're not surprised to hear that it comes from the Old English. This is not a Latin word at all. It comes from the Old English, which explains its resemblance to the German term. And looking at the German term and looking at the word-for-word meaning of the German term, which has the same roots, helps us to interpret it. Wohlfahrt, that's a combination of wohl and fahren or fahrt. Wohl is like well, isn't it? Fahren, go, travel, fare. And of course, we say in German, wie geht's Ihnen? You can almost say the same thing in English, can't you? How's it going? How's it going? And in older forms of English, are things faring well? How's it faring? Are things faring well? You can almost still say that today. So there you are, faring well, going well. What is going well? What is faring well? I think this etymology leads us instinctively to the next obvious question. In pairs, make a list of points that you feel important for you personally to be able to be faring well. Okay, so imagine you're well, imagine you're enjoying good well-being this week. Why? To kick you off, one example would be health. If I've got a cold, I'm really not faring well. Things are not going well this week because of my lousy cold. Okay, so health is important for you to be faring well. What else is important? You'll quickly find a couple of things, but try and make the list as long as you can. You might be able to manage 8 or 10 points quite easily. Pause here and natter with your neighbour. What's important for our welfare? I made a list. I found a number of points. Health we've just mentioned. What about employment? Your work's important to your happiness, your well-being, your welfare, and of course the income you get from your work. What about childcare? If you're a parent, that's undoubtedly a really, really important part of your faring well, especially if you're busy working or studying. You want to know that the kids are being looked after well. childcare is important. When you get to my age, you start worrying about what happens later in your life. Indeed, a few years ago, I had one of those meetings with my bank manager where I was sold rather expensive pensions, Riester, the whole deal. So we think about our income in old age, pensions, but also our care in old age. Maybe we have to go into a nursing home. Good. What about your education, your training, studying? That's an important part of your welfare. Environment, this is a very German point, isn't it? We care about the world around us. We want to be in a nice social environment. We want to be in a place with clean air, without litter everywhere, without pollution. So the environment is important for our well-being, for our welfare. Fairness, equality, I want to know that I have the same chances, the same opportunities as other people. And I want to be feeling safe. I may not ever notice, the police officers or the court buildings, but it's lovely to know that they're there protecting me from crime. Final point that I'm mentioning here, freedom. I can choose my own political opinions. I can choose my own religious beliefs. Isn't that wonderful? So those freedoms are also contributing to our welfare. And again, this is only a small selection. Your list may be much, much longer. Welfare leads us to some really interesting social policy jargon, in particular, the welfare state. The welfare state. Discuss with your partner, what is a welfare state? What is it exactly? Whilst doing so, whilst discussing this English word, you might find yourself translating it into German. And it's worth noting, 2 translations into German are possible. What are they, and which do you find the best? Pause here. I can give you a textbook definition from one of our great thinkers, one of the most important social policy authors of the last century, Esping Andersen. He notes that a common working textbook definition of the welfare state would probably be state responsibility for securing some basic modicum of welfare for its citizens. And you're thinking to yourself, what on earth does modicum mean? It's a funny choice, isn't it? I think he stole that word from Marshall. Modicum means a little bit. Modicum means a little bit. Have another look at that definition. I've given you pause in a minute. Natter with your neighbour. What do you think of the terms in particular, securing, basic, and modicum? Why has he chosen those terms? Pause here. What did you come up with? It's quite fascinating. If modicum means little bit, then modicum and basic together is kind of funny. He's almost repeating himself there, isn't he? He's deliberately stressing that a welfare state is not a lot of welfare. It's just a little bit of welfare. It's a basic bit of welfare for the citizens of the country. Securing is a really interesting idea. The state doesn't have to give the welfare. Government offices might give you money, but the state doesn't have to. You can imagine it being organised in quite a different way. All the state does is make sure you get it, whether you get it privately, through the work of charities, or from the state directly. It's not in our definition. And in terms of that choice of words, Esping Andersen is kind of acknowledging the diversity of welfare state forms out there. There really are lots of different kinds of welfare state. Translating it into German, Wohlfahrtsstaat seems to be the kind of standard translation. I find that German word quite unnatural, and I'm not sure if it doesn't have different nuances of meaning. Wohlfahrtsstaat, to my ears, it sounds like an expression you might even see in the Beltz. Es sind doch kein Wohlfahrtsstaat. Oder, it seems to be quite a politically loaded term. In particular, I think it suggests a very generous welfare state. And that's not Esping Andersen's meaning here. He's using it in a very neutral sense. He's not using the word to describe only the best, but rather various forms of social protection within countries' systems. So be careful, that nuance of generous is not in the English original today, so be careful with that. The other German translation which comes to mind is Sozialstaat. I didn't really say that in English. I've only really seen the word social state used to describe Germany. But maybe Sozialstaat is a much nicer translation of welfare state because it has a bit of vagueness. The exact quality of this welfare state is quite unclear. And that may be left to our politicians anyway. Which services? So if I talk about the welfare state, if I talk about social policy, we're thinking of concrete benefits and services. Clearly, not all services improving our welfare fall into classic understandings of the welfare state. I've mentioned security, for example, the police force. That's not a classic welfare state service. So we definitely have kind of like a set of services with maybe boundaries around them. Some services are welfare state services, others maybe aren't. Which areas do welfare state authors normally mean when thinking about concrete services? I'm going to give you a handbook cover in a minute. And what are the book chapters of that handbook? In a moment, we talked about the dimensions of welfare, the things we need to fare well. Maybe that list can inspire you. Which areas of services do these dimensions result in? Pause here, natter with your partner. What did you come up with? The handbook I had in mind is the one, the cover of which you'll find here, the Oxford Handbook of the Welfare State. Looking at the contents of that book leads us to the classic, the standard welfare state services. Pensions, I talked about worrying about my old age. A pension is going to be part of that. Healthcare, long-term care, nursing care. Of course, we have a social insurance for this in Germany, don't we? Work accident and sickness benefits, if I can't work, a compensation for that. Disability services and benefits. Unemployment insurance. Labour market activation, so measures from the state to keep people working, maybe involving retraining, that kind of thing. Social assistance, the financial support for poor people. Family benefits and services. You know, my kids are in a kindergarten, let's say, or in a creche for very young children. Those kind of services. Also, the kindergeld you get, the money that you get for your kids. What about housing? Germany has a lot of social housing stock, for example. That's part of the welfare state. Interestingly, in the English language, we always include education. For us, education is part of the welfare state. It's part of social policy. Bizarrely, in Germany, we tend to separate social policy and education policy. And as an Anglo-Saxon German, I've never really understood why. That German separation always confuses me horribly. I find education a very basic central part of the welfare system. So here you are. Once again, this list is not complete, it's not comprehensive, but those are the more common services which we might relate to the welfare state. You may have others. You may say, hey, let's have cheap bus and train tickets, or even free bus and train tickets. You know, that would also be another nice example. The list could be longer. Good, I'm going to come to a close here. Of course, this topic will be continuing on the next video. Hope you like this one. Thanks for listening, guys.